Hello, I'm Jean Pete, and I welcome you back to our show, Better Living. Better Living is brought to you by the Homestead Hope Foundation and is sponsored by Homestead Hospice, where commitment to education and premier hospice care helps patients and families through life's most important journey.
Thank you for joining me again this week. Today, I bring to you Ron Baker. Ron is a certified senior advisor, also a U.S. Coast Guard veteran, Vietnam era, professional member of the American Association for Wartime Veterans, and an Elder Care Matters Alliance member. Today, we're going to talk to you about the VA aid and attendance benefit, funeral trusts, estate planning tips, asset protection, inheritance, charitable giving. We have a lot to cover. But first, I want to introduce you today to Ron Baker. Ron, thank you. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and I hope that the time that the audience spends listening will be beneficial.
Absolutely. Well, you know, there's a lot to inform our audience about, and this is a very important topic, not just about estate planning, but I do want to get the word out about that VA aid and attendance benefit. I think we've done a better job in the last couple of years about getting information out to veterans about the fact that this benefit is available, but I still think there's an awful lot of people out there that just don't know that there is help because they are a veteran.
Well, that's absolutely true, and there's a lot of misconceptions about this benefit that some people may think that they're only eligible if the veteran served in a war theater as opposed to the actual wartime eras of World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and there's even going to be a large percentage of veterans coming up in years that will be following from the Gulf War, which is a very extended period.
So before we even talk about all of the rest of the things that we have to inform folks about today regarding estate planning, let's just go right into this VA aid and attendance benefit. Can you just summarize what exactly this benefit is?
Yes. One of the things, actually probably should go into the rates that a veteran or a surviving spouse would be eligible for. And let me say at this point that especially dealing with the subject of hospice patients, there's often a surviving spouse, and it could be the veteran themselves or the surviving spouse of the veteran. So this is a salient issue for a lot of people. But if there are two married veterans, then if they need assisted living, and in some cases if the proper planning is done, also in home care, it's a little more convoluted, a little more, few more hoops you have to jump through. But let's just say that for assisted living, two married veterans would be eligible for $2,676 a month towards their care, and that's the 2013 rate. Now, a married veteran and spouse would be eligible for $2,054 a month. Often it's the surviving spouse or the single veteran. So the single veteran is eligible for $1,732 a month, and the surviving spouse of a veteran is eligible for $1,113 a month.
Okay, that's a lot of money.
Well, in some cases, care costs are rising dramatically. In some cases, if they have Social Security and a pension, depending on the cost, it may allow them to break even. Or combined with other assets, it may stretch out their period where they won't run out of money. But we want to make sure that the spouse or the veteran has the best quality of care they can have as time goes on, as much as possible. Now, just as a note, we have actually helped over 11,000 families nationwide.
That's terrific. Now, I do want to just kind of get into a little bit more details about aid and attendance. So if you are a veteran or the spouse of a veteran, you qualify for benefits if you so need them to help in your care when you get older. So based on that statement, what are the criteria in order to get this program?
Well, generally, to kind of simplify it, you would need help with the ADLs, which are the activities of daily living. So that might be medication management, help transferring. There may be some people that, of course, have incontinence, can't feed themselves, and then there's incidental ADLs, which you couldn't prepare the meals and can't get around. You might be housebound, but you have to need. If you have a long-term care policy, people have to be healthy to get the long-term care policy. This is just the opposite. If you said this was a type of a LTC policy, you have to actually need long-term care, and then you can get it.
Okay.
So it's the opposite of insurance, and it's
so
not insurance.
For instance, because I like to paint the picture for folks, I just did a show recently with the gentleman from Meals on Wheels, and he was talking about an adult day program. And those programs can run $50 a day, so that's $250 a week, but that's your $1,000 a month. So if you're a surviving spouse of a veteran and you need to be placed at an adult daycare so you don't end up in a facility, would this aid and attendance program help pay for the adult day program?
Probably not. The reason is that you've got to have health care expenses that are close to or exceed income in order to qualify. And then if they're able to live by themselves and they just need someone to bring them some meals, then they don't have the ADL requirements. So it's if you look at it for people.
Well, but I mean, if it's a dementia.
Well, if they have dementia, it depends on the degree of dementia. But if someone has dementia, can they be living alone? Do they need a full-time caregiver? And so, therefore, those things would enter into it. But if it's just that they need somebody to help them bring food to them and they're living by themselves, they're probably not going to qualify. Now, the VA does have some other programs. It's not in the aid and attendance part of the assistance, where they do sometimes send out a couple hours of home care per month. But generally, those people are going to need management themselves so that they are protected from hazards of daily living. But being by themselves may not be the best thing for them.
Okay, so just because I might have just created some confusion, I want to take away that confusion. So if you are a vet and you have a spouse who is also a veteran, and your spouse has been diagnosed with dementia, and you still have to go off and work every day to pay the bills, does that spouse qualify to get help if you did need to go to maybe an adult center because you needed help with ADLs?
Probably not. Again, because if he's going off to work, then there's going to be an income ratio there, and so therefore he's probably not going to qualify for this benefit.
Okay, so you have to qualify both diagnostically and financially.
Yes, and there's asset and income limits. However, the asset limit is a very subjective thing, and the VA does not have a look back. So there's certain things that you do for planning regarding that, as opposed to Medicaid having a 5-year look back. And there's good reasons why there is no look back on the VA thing, because monthly costs for assisted living or nursing homes are just start to go off the chart. And so therefore, even somebody that has $100,000 or $200,000, even 3 in terms of long-term care. Depending on what kind of care they need and what it's costing per month, that money can go away in a year or 2.
That's right, and we actually see that often.
And it's a shame because people have a misunderstanding. Now, commonly, the information that people get from a lot of different sources is that someone can apply for the benefit and have $80,000. But that's a misconception in itself. That would be based on somebody who might be, say, 65 years old, and they could initially go in and apply and might get approved if they had $80,000. But generally, the older you get, the less money you can have because they're subjective about people's longevity, and it's a subjective and bureaucratic process. Most people who apply for the benefit on their own because they're not familiar with the nuances end up with a lot of complications.
So they should seek out an agent that understands this benefit in and out and how to fill the paperwork out. And
yeah, well, and here's another thing. There's all kinds of people have all kinds of choices on what they can do to obtain this benefit. The American Association for Wartime Veterans has been around since 2001. It really started by happenstance, but the thing is, we have done this, as I said, over 11,000 times, and we have obtained, and these are last year's figures, over $260 million in benefits. But we've had a lot of experience in getting people approved. There may be other people that call themselves financial planners, and they'll say, well, you just reduce your assets, and they do a financial transaction or a transfer. But you have to consider Medicaid, and you have to consider the safety of people's money. The return of people's money at any age is more important than return on the money. People shouldn't maybe put money in risky things.
You really, again, it sounds like you've got to look at the big picture. And like everything, and the reason we do this show is to bring experts to folks in our communities so that they can reach out to the right people to live their best life while they have life.
Yes.
And so we do want to make sure folks understand that, there are experts in certain areas, but you always have to look at the big picture. And this is one of those times where if you make the wrong move, it can affect you for the rest of your life.
Well, yeah, and people going into this, and maybe they're doing it because someone says, well, you can do this by yourself, or I read this on the internet or whatever. They don't understand that in the VA will say, well, owning a house isn't a problem. But it will be a problem if that house has to be sold, and it probably is going to have to be sold. Plus, when people move out of the house, it's an asset that's readily convertible to cash, and that can be held against them in the process. On top of that, if they would sell unknowingly because they said, oh, well, the VA said a house is not a problem. So after they're not living in the house for a year or two, then the family says, well, we need to sell this, and if we sell it, we'll have more money for care. Well, because they didn't get the right advice, they sell the house, it sells in the veteran's name, and all of a sudden, the veteran receives that income. He's no longer eligible for the VA benefit, and they have the possibility of having to pay past benefits back. If that was a veteran alone and he or she was on the benefit for 2 years, you're talking about $40,000 having to pay back plus get disqualified.
Wow. That's crazy.
And you haven't started the Medicaid look back. Families think they can quit claim a house and just get it. Well, so then when you sell the house, they didn't think about the fact that they're going to have to pay taxes on that entire sales price. Whereas if you use the right legal vehicles, you will maintain the original tax exemption, and it won't be held against the veteran. And I have legal access if people need that. I'm not an attorney, but I have a very prestigious law firm that when I refer people to them, and they don't pay the high fees of estate planning that are required by many law firms.
Okay, so we've had a lot given to our audience today, and I just want to kind of pull it back a little bit and try to simplify it just a tad, because I have some questions, so I'm sure other people have questions. I understand aid and attendance. It's mostly to give you help if you need help in the home with ADLs or help to pay an assisted living facility, correct?
Yeah, yes.
And you have to meet criteria based on the level of help that you need, how many ADLs you can or can't do. So you have to meet criteria diagnostically and also financially.
Yes.
But that financial criteria is a little bit cloudy, not completely set in stone. But we never really kind of got to the bottom of parameters so people could understand whether this is a benefit that they may or may not qualify for. Do you have a parameter there to help people understand?
Well, generally, if someone gets to the point where they need assisted living, to try and keep this simple, then they're going to they should be meeting the parameters for getting aid and attendance. If they're housebound, they can't leave the house, they need help with continence problems, medication management, transferring, they would be eligible for the housebound portion of the aid and attendance benefit. Now, fixed income can be a problem. If somebody, make an example, if somebody is making $6,000 a month, generally they would be told they're ineligible for the veterans benefit. But if their care is costing close to that a month, then they're not going to have any income. So therefore they would be eligible. And if they've got some assets, if you take their income and the veterans benefit and use their assets, you can stretch out their care period to any number of years. Every case is an individual case.
Yeah, but this sounds okay. So basically, then, income to cost of health care ratio. How much income can you have left and still get this benefit? I guess if we're just going to get to the bottom line.
Well, you just have to consider each case individually. If your care is costing $3,000 a month and your income is $5,000 a month, then you're probably not going to qualify.
Okay.
But that's the fixed income. That's not the assets. Mm-hmm. There's just a slew of people out there that their income is $2,000 or $3,000 a month, or even $4,000 combined, and their care is $5,000 a month.
And you're going to see more of that, honestly. I just want to make sure people don't shy away from investigating whether or not they can get this benefit because they think they make too much money. So I wanted to give some kind of an indication of how that is. But you could still make good money.
Well, you could.
A lot of money. And if your health care expenses, you could still qualify for this benefit. So don't let your income stop you from investigating whether you would qualify.
And most of again, we're talking about people who are generally 65 years or older, and actually at 65 nowadays, people are generally, I hate to see it when someone is 65 or 66 and they need this care. But generally people are 70 and above where they get into this. So they're not earning so much money, it may be their fixed income or investments. And then investments you really have to look at that and see what you have to do, because the veteran can only own so much in their name. But there's ways to do this properly and build in the estate planning that needs to be done, and also eliminate complications with Medicaid and probate.
Okay. So again, Tim knows a lot about this aid and attendance benefit from the VA because he is a veteran. He is also a certified senior advisor. And I want to get your information out there, Ron. If someone has questions about this benefit and wants to get in touch with you, we do air in the Atlanta market, the Gulf Coast of New Orleans, and Phoenix, Arizona. But I'm sure that if they are in an area that you can't cover, you can at least help them find someone in their area as well, correct?
Absolutely. We have what we call professional members in a lot of states. I think the ones that you mentioned for sure. Do you want my phone number? Do you want me to?
Yeah, whatever your phone number, email, whatever you'd like to give.
Well, my office itself is at 1924 Claremont Road, Rutgers, right near the intersection of North Druid Hills and Claremont Road. And my phone number is 404-856-0656. And my email, and Claremont is spelled so many ways, is claremont1924@gmail.com. And that Claremont is spelled CLAIRMONT. So Claremont1924@gmail.com. And that's a good way to get a hold of me. Again, the phone number 404-856-0656. And I welcome anyone around my table who wants to learn about the benefit. I also have informationals, usually about twice a month in the evening, over in a little conference room by my office at around 6:45, and you can call and find out when that's going to be to make arrangements to just attend that.
Wonderful. So they can come to an information session.
Sure can, and I will give during the day. I'll make office appointments, no charge. Spend a couple hours with people and go over different scenarios in private.
Okay. So again, if you are a veteran or a spouse of a veteran and need help because you have health care costs that you're having trouble paying for, you may also qualify for this Veterans Aid and Attendance benefit. And this is no small impact here. If you're a veteran, you qualify for $1,732 a month. Veteran $2,054. If you're the surviving spouse of a veteran, you don't even have to be the veteran. You may not realize this, but you qualify for veterans benefits. And if you have health care costs, you can get $1,113 a month to pay towards your health care. And two married veterans, that's $2,676. That can make it in your life. That can keep you at home. That can help you go to an assisted living facility instead of a nursing home. That can help you get help in your home to keep you at home. So please call Ron Baker and get more information about whether or not you qualify for the Veterans Aid and Attendance Program. Again, he's at 404-856-0656, or you can email him at Claremont, CLAIRMONT, 1924@gmail.com. Ron, it seems like we never have enough time, but is there anything else about this VA Aid and Attendance Program that we didn't talk about that you want to get out in this last minute?
Well, it's very important to have family involvement in anything that we do, especially if you're talking about transferring assets of somebody who's older. Generally, if someone calls me up and says, can you come to my house, and they may be a veteran or something and they're older, of course, generally my answer is probably not, because it's so important to do things in the sunlight, and you have to involve members of the family. Sometimes there's a veteran that has no family and has no assets or anything. Well, we can go ahead and do the best to help them out, but generally it has
to get your family involved. Let them be in the know as well, so that we can all make together the best decisions for your future.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, well, we do have to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Jean Pete, and I welcome you back to our show, Better Living. Better Living is brought to you by the Homestead Hope Foundation and is sponsored by Homestead Hospice, where commitment to education and premier hospice care helps patients and families through life's most important journey.
I'm Jean Pete. Thanks for staying with us today. Again, I'm here with Ron Baker, who is not only a veteran, but also a certified senior advisor. And for the first half of the show, we talked a lot about VA aid and attendance benefit, where if you are a veteran or the spouse of a veteran, you may qualify if you meet criteria physically and financially for help with your medical bills. We talked a lot about what that criteria is, what the income that you would receive would be, and why you should contact Ron to get information about whether or not you qualify for that benefit. So again, I'm here with Ron Baker. He's here in Atlanta, and you can contact Ron if you think that you or a loved one may need and qualify for the VA aid and attendance benefit at 404. I'm looking for your phone number,
okay.
Ron. Can you shout out your phone number?
Sure can.
Oh, here it is, 404-856-0656. Or you can shoot him a quick email at Clairmont1924@gmail.com. That's CLAIRMONT1924@gmail.com. But again, thanks for staying with us. This half hour, we're going to talk all about estate planning tips, and that meaning asset protection, tips on transferring property, why Medicaid exemption should be in the back of your mind or the front of your mind when you're making decisions on your assets, and funeral trusts and charitable giving and inheritances. So we have a lot to cover in this half hour. Ron, thanks for staying with us today.
Well, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
And let's start first. We'll kind of go big and funnel it down. Estate planning tips. What do you want folks to know if they are in a position where they need to think about their assets and what the smartest moves are for their assets for the rest of their life?
Okay, some of the more difficult things to think about or to approach are the fact that people forget that Medicaid has a 5-year look back on assets when people have to go into a nursing home, and there's also where houses may be exempt from Medicaid recovery, but there's so many things that people don't understand. But it is a good thing for people who may be getting up there in age, maybe to do things so that their assets will not be subject to probate, would be protected against creditors and predators, that maybe the children won't lose everything to Medicaid, but on the same token, children should be responsible for paying for proper care of their parents, and not just depend on Medicaid, and proper planning can do that. There's also a little-known fact about estate planning people don't realize, and that is a lot of people are healthy, and then all of a sudden there's a medical event, and they have a stroke, and so they have to go into a nursing home, and they're going to use up all their assets. We're talking about the older generations now, not the younger. It could be, but so they end up with the realization that, say, maybe there's $50,000 or $60,000 left, and they say, well, Dad's got to go into a nursing home, and we know that we're not going to be able to pay for this nursing home because the nursing home may be $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a month. We're going to run out of money. But there's things that can be done so that the veteran or the not only just the person themselves, whether they're a veteran or not, so that their funeral costs are paid for. Families may spend a lot of money on their parents and think that, well, when Dad dies, we'll get the money back maybe from his cash value life insurance. That's cash value life insurance is accessible by Medicaid. But so let's just say that a family had person had $50,000. They have to go in a nursing home, and the social worker says, well, after you spend your money down to about $2,000, then you'll qualify for Medicaid. So in 3 months, 4 months, they paid the nursing home cash. Qualify for Medicaid. But what they forgot is, how do we pay for the final expenses? What about the money we've already spent? How do we get some of that back? It's an ultimate insult, if you will, if you've spent money on your parents, you've been helping them, and then you end up having to pay for their funeral. It's too bad. It's unfortunate. But in Georgia, $10,000 per person is Medicaid exempt immediately. That means for the father, the spouse, and the children of the family. So they can set aside $10,000, immediately qualify for Medicaid. What the nursing home and the social worker may not tell them is that you have to do that before you apply for Medicaid. So we can do that. There's no cost to a funeral trust. Now, here's the thing also, is people are very, move around a lot. They're portable. So as opposed to making a prepaid arrangement at a specific funeral home and the funeral home becomes the beneficiary, the funeral trust, there's no charge to make the trust, only what you put into it, but it is good in any of the 50 states.
So if you had a funeral trust and you wanted to go to a funeral home to reserve a specific spot, could you give them the information on the trust, or do you have to pay them up front? You know what I mean?
Generally, a funeral home wants a paid up in advance contract.
Okay.
Okay, but then you have to remember that you all decided to move to Florida or whatever happened a couple years. Things change over time, but then you're obligated to have that funeral back at that original funeral home. Or in Tennessee and Wisconsin, there's major deficits in some of those private funeral arrangements. In fact, in Wisconsin, they called it a funeral trust, but it really wasn't. And last year, in 2012, it was over $20 million short.
Holy cow!
But anyhow, if someone is at the point where they really need immediate Medicaid planning, they would have to, and I'm just using a figure, $50,000. They need to come to me before they apply for Medicaid. Once you apply for Medicaid, then all the assets are going to have to be paid, towards the care.
And it is very important to seek a professional who understands, again, we talked about this in the first half hour, the big picture, so that they can help you make the smartest moves. This is a time where it is worth it to pay for someone who really understands the ins and outs of the ramifications of the decisions, so that they can best guide you and navigate you through the entire big picture system.
And
in the end, you'll save money.
Well, the object is, to, again, preserving your assets, which is my website, preservingyourassets.com. But I will even, if people say they have their own attorney, they're highly engaged in what they've done, I will assist that attorney with the funeral trust. It's not going to increase the cost for planning, and the attorney actually is better off because he can offer that as part of his services. But setting aside that money with a trust that costs no money to originate except what you put into it is a fantastic thing, and it's Medicaid exempt.
Okay. So you talked about the importance of understanding that whole Medicaid situation and taking that $10,000 out before you apply for Medicaid or you lose it, and also the 5-year look back. I talk about this a lot. So if anyone's listening that's listened to my show before, and I hope you're there, and I thank you, you're going to know I talk about this all the time. The minute you get a long-term diagnosis, I talk specifically about Alzheimer's or any of the dementias, you need to go and seek the advice of someone who can help plan your estate. Because the minute you get a diagnosis that you know is going to be a long-term decline, there's going to be exorbitant health care costs in that. And there is, no matter how much you try, a possibility that your loved one may need to go to a nursing home. And Medicaid looks back 5 years. So you need to move your assets around to protect yourself, your heirs, and your money so that if that time should come, you've gotten your assets in order. Let's just say. Because 5 years, really, there's a lot of long-term illnesses, 10, 12, 15 years, but you've got to get your stuff together because it could be 3.
That's right. People, and people say to me, well, what is the date I should look at this? Well, you can't predict 5 years ahead. Maybe that day is today.
Today, absolutely.
Here's another thing I see. People do not understand how a power of attorney works. And this, by the way, I'm not giving you any legal advice. The power of attorney sometimes can be written by somebody who is not real familiar with elder care. But a power of attorney needs to be durable. And that, again, this is not legal advice, but you want something that will work when someone is incapacitated, and that's where that durable thing comes in. People wait and don't get a power of attorney, and they have dementia, then it's up to the court to decide what happens. So
yeah, and there's 2 different powers of attorney. One is for healthcare decisions, and one is for finances, and they're both as equally important. And so there's just so much to do and to know, and it's a lot to swallow when you get a diagnosis in the first place. And so to bring on the rest can sometimes be overwhelming. But I cannot stress it enough that the minute you get a terminal or chronic diagnosis, please go and seek someone professional to help you get your finances and your healthcare POA decision in order, advance directives. I've seen too many families broken apart because of lack of planning for finances, but also lack of planning for what it is that you want, what types of decisions you want made regarding your health care, and who you want to be in charge of making those decisions. It may not be your spouse that can fulfill your wishes. They may not be able to take you off life support. They just may not be capable. So you may need to choose a different power of attorney. It may not be your son that is best to handle your finances. It may be your niece. And these are all things you need to seek a professional to get professional advice for. You'll be doing your children a favor, because I've seen too many times children who are wrought with guilt, not knowing if they did the right thing or made the right decision for their mother or father. And it's the last gift you are able to give to your children. So although it's a tough discussion to have, although it's a tough thought process to go through, it is truly a gift that you're giving the people that are in charge of your care. So I'll get off my soapbox now, and we'll start talking about asset protection again.
Well, that's what you said is very important. Another thing that people may not realize is that if they don't do anything, the state of Georgia has a health care directive they can download online, and it can at least prepare and have that takes care of a lot of things. And most attorneys will furnish that for people in part of their planning that they're doing. It's very important.
So we talked about Medicaid, the 5-year look back. We talked about taking that $10,000 out that you get before you apply for Medicaid. We talked about funeral trusts. Let's talk about charitable giving and inheritances if people do want money left behind. Are there tips there that you want to give folks?
Well, yes, there are, and there's a number of ways to do that. And one of the things that I'd like to cover, and it kind of blends in with what we're talking about today, is that obviously if you want to do things that are going to pass money on, then you want that money to be protected so that it is not subject to creditors and predators, and so that it's not going to be a problem with probate. And a good vehicle, and people get scared when they hear this in a way, because he's going to talk about some life insurance. It is not your grandfather's life insurance. It's not your father's Oldsmobile type thing. Say there's a person who decides that they want to leave a certain amount of money. Let's just use $50,000. $50,000 to either a charity, to their nieces, to their nephews. They really don't want that money to pass until they die. They want that to be an inheritance. Okay. They could go to the bank and they could purchase a CD and they could make that POD, payable upon death. It won't gain much value over that time. And the owner would still be Joe Smith or Josephine Smith, and some unexpected event could be all kinds of things. They get sued. Anything could happen, and all of a sudden that asset is lost. If they are mildly insurable, they can get a single premium life insurance policy, which immediately increases the estate value. It's very important. Wouldn't you rather, you want to give $50,000 to your church, wouldn't you rather that would turn into $85,000 or $90,000 plus that policy? If you needed that policy, any part of that policy in years to come is guaranteed to have no surrender value. So that means that if you put $50,000 into that policy and 2 years later, for some reason, you needed that money for your own care, you would get that $50,000 back with no penalty. It's a very important, and it establishes asset transfers, again, having to do with the 5-year look back. People give...
Yeah, that's important. I didn't know that.
Well, people give money to their... all these I hear in doing the veteran planning or whatever, and Grandpa died, and she had a certain amount of money, and all of a sudden they come to me and they say, well, I gave $20,000 to Jim and $10,000 to niece Janie, and I'm saying, you realize what you did? Do you understand that if something happens, and they, of course, they either paid for their college with it, hopefully they did that, or they went out and bought a car, or somebody went to Las Vegas, or any kind of thing that could happen, that if that person had to need Medicaid, because they thought, oh, you just spend down your money, and then you're eligible for Medicaid, that Medicaid would say, well, we looked, and you had all this money 4 years ago. Where's that money now? And until someone can pay that towards your care, you're not eligible for Medicaid.
Right.
If you want to give that to them, and you could be insured, then or even if the sons or daughters of that person could be insured, so that money would be preserved and be there, and the family has an understanding what's going on, because you don't just do this blindly. So that money would be there to pay back the gift. Remember, that's the important thing for Medicaid. Pay back the gift. In order to you transfer funds to a relative, you're gifting them. It's a tax-free event. But for Medicaid, you have to protect those funds for 5 years.
But really, do you have a choice? Because if somebody's got to go to college, they got to have that money now.
Well, that's an individual decision. But
yeah.
you gifted that money to the child. You see what I'm saying? The grandma gifted that.
So you're putting yourself at risk. You're kind of throwing the dice there.
Yeah, that 5 year. What did you spend money on in the last 5 years? That's really the question. And again, there's a lot of individual circumstances that you really can't cover. Say in a public event.
In a half-hour radio show.
Yeah, or being in public. I don't want to misinform anybody.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just things to look out for.
Which is why they need to call you. So let's again give your contact information. How do folks get in touch with you, and where are you located here in Atlanta?
Okay, my office is at 1924 Claremont Road, which is near the intersection of North Druid Hills and Claremont Road. And my phone number is 404-856-0656. My email is Claremont, and anyone around Atlanta knows that's spelled different ways, Claremont1924@gmail.com, and that is CLAIRMONT1924@gmail.com. Interesting little note, if you're inside the city limits of Decatur, it's spelled different than it is outside the city limits.
Is that right?
Yes.
Now, is there a significance in 1924?
That's
curious.
That's just the address. That's my address.
I see.
1924 Claremont Road.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm in Suite 170. You should call or email me to make sure I'm in the office, because I may be at an assisted living, working with people or doing an informational. And also, if I'm with a client, then obviously that's not going to work out for you. So it's virtually by appointment.
And in the first half hour, we did talk about your informational sessions. We talked about it specific to the VA aid and attendance benefit, but when you give these informational sessions, are they on different topics, and can you let them know again when you hold those sessions?
Generally, it's regarding the VA aid and attendance benefit. People want to know about different asset transfers for estate planning. I usually do that as private one-on-one office appointments. I do have a nice PowerPoint on transferring assets and what you can do. Now, let me add one thing, which dovetails into this, and that is that the single premium life policies also have virtually an assisted living benefit that comes with them. Very important. So a lot of people don't want to buy long-term care because they think, well, we're going to pay all this money for a certain amount of time, and if we don't use it, we'll just lose all that money. Well, with this single premium life, which pays a certain percentage of the face value, not the premium value, into the policy, allows a certain amount of money per month to go towards long-term care. So it becomes a hybrid situation. And I'm going to say this, let me know if we're running out of time, but
not yet.
But long-term care is getting harder and harder to get, and it has more and more health requirements, whereas the single premium life is a lot easier to get and combines long-term care with it. So it's not just a one pony show, if you want to say that.
I know. I in my past life I sold. I worked in the financial industry and helped with mutual funds, and they gave me long-term care for a little while there as well. And I can tell you, it's confusing. It was confusing a long time ago, and now as it's ever changed, it's even more confusing. It's not something you can navigate through yourself. So again, Ron, I can't thank you enough for coming today. These are very important things for folks to understand and to reach out and be motivated to get the assistance now to get your finances in order for your future. So again, we've been talking to Ron Baker, who is a certified senior advisor. He's at 1924 Claremont Road, Suite 170, Decatur, Georgia, 30033, and he can be reached at 404-856-0656. If you have any questions about asset transfers, estate planning, gifting, charitable trusts, funeral arrangements, Medicaid, if you're a veteran and you want information about the Aid and Attendance Program, please contact Ron today and make an appointment so that you too can get your things in order and live your best life.
I'm Jeannie Pete. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day and week ahead, and listen here same time next week and every week. Homestead Hope Foundation is your resource for a healthy life. God bless.